the best experience as a rugby league player is running out in the Queensland jersey at Suncorp Stadium.
And Hunt goes himself as he can, and he picks up another one. He goes Payne Haas. Oh, look at that.
He is big, he is strong, he can offload.
Here goes for Fido.
But it would have been easier to stop a truck that was coming that way.
Hammerso Tabuai Fido. It's hammer time.
Will now. She gets down low. She'll get it down this time. The victors in Women's State of Origin 2021.
Well, thanks for joining us this week on Queenslander in the lead-up to the NRL final series. A delayed episode this week due to Paul Green's funeral service here in Brisbane at Wynnum. Quite a moving service. All three of us were there. Your thoughts, reflections, Lockie, on the day?
It was really well done. You know, it was a great tribute to the man, and I guess, you know, there's... You know, the family, Amanda and the kids and the extended family, it was I think a great service to say goodbye to a very good man and obviously a very successful man. And I guess, you know, from my perspective, it was, you know, it's sad to see him go, obviously, but, you know, now the attention and I guess is about rallying around the family and being there to support them.
Yeah, it was a wonderful service, Lockie. You're right there. Plenty of footballers, and it's quite remarkable how we see footy players go from the biggest, toughest people on the planet into guys that are shedding a tear or two, certainly for the respect of Greenie. A remarkable mix of players, businessmen and families throughout the service, and it was you know, a real difficult issue for most people there not to shed a tear. Very well respected, particularly in the different areas around the football communities. Certainly in North Queensland, to see the guys come down was remarkable. Some of their former teammates he had from Cronulla as well, and you'll never hear a bad word. I heard a guy say you'll never hear a bad word at a funeral, but if we're talking about Paul Green, you'll never hear a bad word, and I thought that was very fitting.
I think one of the things you realise is you would have gone through this, winning premierships in the BRL. When you win a premiership with a player or a coach, you become a lifelong friend. So he won, you know, 2 at the Wynnum Manly, he won 1 at the Roosters as assistant coach, and then the Cowboys, and so there's not just players that played under him, there's administrators that have had this bond, you know, together over a special time in their lives, and hence the reason why so many people were there yesterday.
Quite remarkable. His wife, there was plenty of people shedding a tear there, and you know, she admitted afterwards that was the toughest challenge of her life. A remarkable service, and certainly hearing from the people there, it you know, it was just one of those moments that you'll never forget, that you wish that you weren't actually around to see.
I love the story that his wife Amanda told, that they met outside the Mad Cow in Townsville the week after he joined the Cowboys as a player in the late 90s. So anyone who's been involved with NRL Cowboys in Townsville knows the Mad Cow's the place to be.
The Mad Cow has got 1,000 stories, probably a million stories to tell. It never disappoints.
But it was remarkable that came up, and there were smiles all over the faces of everybody as soon as that was mentioned.
And given how tragic the circumstances were, what can the NRL learn after this incident in terms of maybe players or coaches maybe heaping on the pressure?
Well, I think it just, again, reinforces and highlights that, you know, for a player when they exit, the routine is the biggest thing. For a player, they go from having a routine set and they stick to that because they obviously want to be contracted to their club and play footy. And then when they leave and exit, that changes. And for a coach, it's probably the most intense job there is. And then when you're out of that, you probably just assume that, you know, just relax and enjoy the pressure that's gone.
Yeah.
But for a lot of them, again, their routine completely changes. So they go from being this intense sort of pressure cooker to having almost the music stop, so to speak. And I guess that's the one thing you take out of this, is that you just can't underestimate the change in their environment and what it does to their mental health.
Yeah, we actually did a cross with Paul for the news recently, and it was one of those moments where we were sort of talking about footy in his life. What had it been, and do you ever get over it? And he just said, if I'm like everybody else in the rugby league game, I wanted to stay quite involved in it, never get away from it. And certainly the time that he had in it had some drama, had some celebrations going with it. But the one thing that was there yesterday was the respect from everybody. It was quite remarkable.
And just on the footy side of things now, one of Greeny's former clubs, Lockie, your Broncos, they've chopped and changed the halves this week. No Ezra Mann, Tyson Gamble. What do you think the reasoning is behind that? And, you know, if they do win, sneak into the finals, do you keep Tyson in there now?
Oh, look, I just think Ezra's, you know, he's had a breakout year. But along with a lot of young kids that come through and have a breakout year, that at some point they're not experienced at managing the expectation week in, week out of the NRL season. That becomes a learning process. So very rare will you get a youngster that can stay at that level and just continue it on for the rest of the year. So for mine, I think it's just Ezra probably just needs a break.
Yep.
There's probably a few other young players in there that have maybe played more games than Ezra, but they're in the same boat. And I think the other component is, you know, Broncos probably for a few years haven't had a lot of Origin representation, and they've had a few this year. And managing and dealing with that post-Origin has probably been a whole new experience for the club.
Lockie, you mentioned players that come up and then they reach a level and they set that level and they remain at that way, guys like Ezra. What's the most important issues to you to make sure that a player can get to that stage but then just sort of settle down and retain his approach to the game, his performances on the field? Well,
it's obviously, you know, it'd be very disappointing that he's been dropped, but he needs to see the positive in it. He's had a great year. And it's just, you know, the last few weeks, it's probably been able to deal with the pressures that comes with an NRL, you know, season. And then in saying that, playing against the Storm and then Parramatta, when there was a lot of pressure on the club. So it's a learning experience for him, and it's probably a learning experience for Kevin as coach, that, you know, kids, you know, coming through are going to have a period where they can sustain performance, but they're going to ebb and flow because they're kids and they're inexperienced.
Can you remember your first season at the Broncos? How many games roughly you played?
Oh, I was saying this the other day. Like in '95, I debuted and I played quite a few games, you know, starting because of injuries. And then when the injured players came back, I was on the bench. For all of '96, I pretty much played off the bench as a utility. And then '97, I cracked through and started at fullback. So
it took you nearly 2 years.
Yeah. And I think that's what we sort of forget in the modern day game is that, you know, there's a pathway for a kid coming through the system that if you just put him in the hot seat and continue to just leave him there, at some point they're going to burn out. And I think for Ezra, it's just about staying positive and look at what he's done for this particular year, and he'll be better for it. And you know, he's having a break from it right now. He'll be back. And I would say that there's other players. We talk about Selwyn Cobbo. You know, he needed a break. That's just human nature. When you're a kid or an apprentice, you're going to have a period where it's going to be difficult. You know, that's just we just got to accept that.
And moving forward to next year, do you see Ezra as the long-term six, Wal, at the Broncos? Because Tyson Gamble looks as though he'll probably go to the Knights next year. Reece Walsh comes to fullback. Ezra the six?
Should suggest it. We've been talking about that a little bit today, and that seems like it's going to be the way. I was like Lockie. I quite enjoyed some of his performances. I didn't get to see all of the Broncos games, but he had that thrill of skill about him in his plays, and I think the more games that you get to play in a regular position with the same teammates around you, the better your performances become. And he displayed some wonderful performance. There are a lot of people that relied on being harsh critics. Well, if you think it's that easy, get in and do the job yourself. He showed that he was quite up to it. There is a challenge ahead, and I'm sure he's going to be a much better footballer and a much better person for it.
And a bit of reaction to Kevvie's post-match spray. We saw those great scenes on Wide World of Sports, him in the sheds. Bit of talk of player discontent in the wake of that, Lockie. Would Kevvie be worried about that talk?
No, I don't think so.
They deserved it.
Yeah, they deserved a spray. I mean, none of us were in that dressing room, right? And none of us are in the dressing room at training, so we don't understand or if there is any impact on that spray after the game. But I think obviously, we all know Kevvie's passionate, and he's disappointed with the result and the performance in the last 2 weeks. So at some point, you've got to sit there and I think James Graham said, you've got to face the music, right? So you need to know that that's not acceptable.
Yeah, a lot of people were saying that, he could have performed a little bit better with some common sense. Well, if that was the case, I would have said to you, well, if you can sort of sit there and show no response, no reaction from losing a game, I'm glad you weren't in the dressing room next to me. It came out, and we've how many dressing rooms has there been where the coach has given his players a spray that we haven't got to see? So don't mark Kevvie out of 10 on that performance. He's had a pretty long, difficult season. That wasn't his favourite game, I'm sure, and he will probably, if he feels that he needs to go back to the players and explain it a bit better, he'll do so. But there are some times where giving a team a spray like that can be one of their biggest bonuses.
Yeah, so the dressing room was once sacred. No one could see in there. And I remember when they started putting cameras in there, Wayne would even tell the assistant to put a towel over the cameras. And so not every coach accepted it, but now in the modern age, there's nothing sacred in the dressing room. And look, let's just hope that the spray gets a reaction. Because a lot of people were saying, OK, beaten by 60 by the Storm, let's see how they respond to that. And they didn't respond, right? So Kevin's come out and given them a bit of a home truth, so let's see how they respond to that.
I must say, the part that was sort of that got me a little bit angry, though, it was that some of the players, apparently, and it was only rumoured to, there was no proof of it, some of the players were objecting to Kevvie's criticism of them. Well, if that's the case, get ready for it. You're going to cop a fair bit more, I should imagine, throughout the course of your career. And if you don't like being criticised by a coach, well, go and find another sport, because you're going to get it in rugby league, and 9 times out of 10 it makes you a better footballer, certainly a better person. And I would think, I haven't heard a single report of the players not liking Kevvie. So that's the case. It's extremely unlikely.
And that's the challenge now. OK, so you've been given a spray. Right? The challenge is how do you react to that?
Yeah.
That's the opportunity. So if you want to, and I would say that most of the individuals in our sport or any sport that are really good at what they've done for a very long time, they take criticism and they use it as motivation. Yeah,
I often regard the best spray I ever copped in my life came from my former Valleys coach, Ross Strudwick, who used the whole 10 minutes of our break, and it was down at Wynnum when we were playing against Wynnum Manly, and all I heard was him talking about my reaction to my Queensland buddies and Gene Miles, Greg Dowling, Colin Scott. Terry, he said, you're spending more time helping them win than helping your own team win, and I was furious with it. I went back out in the second half and I was pretty happy with the way I reacted to it.
Who won the game?
It all went. I think they ended up winning the game, but I was happy with the way that the second half went. At the end of the game, he said it made you react, but it also made the rest of the players react. So it was all a case, and I think we've all copped one of those throughout the course of our career from the coach. Bennett was one of those guys that didn't sort of rely on screaming at players. He'd just tell them what he wanted and got the same sort of response out of it. But it's
I remember one day we were getting towed up at Campbelltown against West. At half-time, he walked in, walked around, didn't say a word, and then walked out.
Oh.
But we knew, we knew he didn't have to say a word.
Yeah.
And we come back out, I think we won the game, yeah.
And what about the Broncos if they do finish 9th? The season success or failure or somewhere in between?
Oh, look, after 5 weeks ago, it's a failure, because everyone expected finals. We were on the verge of top 4, so if we don't play finals, you know, if you look at it from 5 weeks ago, it's a failure. But if at the start of the year you said, look, we were in contention to play finals, you would say that that's an improvement on where we were last year at 14th. Yes, I know Adam Reynolds came and I know Kurt Capewell, but it's a step in the right direction. It'll be, however this season finishes, whether it's short-lived or not, it'll be how they respond and react for next year.
Yeah. Yeah, this last game seems to be so crucial. So almost the whole season could hang on the reputation of this last game. If they get flogged again by the Dragons, almost everyone regards it as a failure. But if they put in a really good performance, they win, people look at it and go, oh, we have improved.
Yeah.
There's a lot hinging on it,
Yeah, they put the petrol back in the tank. They remain a real chance, dependent on the outcome of another game, of course. So I'm sure that'll inspire them once again, inspire the coach, and increase their self-belief.
And our Queensland team that will definitely be playing in the finals, my Cowboys, Lockie, I like to remind you every time I can. But their final round game is a weird one against second-string Panthers team. They're resting a lot of players because they've already won the minor premiership. How important is a good performance for the Cowboys, given that they're playing a second-string team?
Yeah, look, I think, you know, if Penrith win this game, that's obviously a testament to Penrith, but it's also going to be a bit of a confidence sort of knockdown for the Cowboys. So, look, I think they're obviously very capable of winning that game and winning it well. They just need to get back to playing. Is Dearden back?
Well, he's in the squad. They're going to make a decision on captain's run, so they don't know.
Okay. All right. So, yeah, look, I think this is obviously a dress rehearsal for the finals, and we talked about it last week about just playing their game. And I think we're going to get to this, but I thought Drinkwater back into 6 probably upset their rhythm a bit doing that.
It was weird because he played fullback in defence and then played 5'8" in attack. So, like, as a fullback / 5'8", how hard is that mentally going back and forth?
Well, I think the purpose of that would have been, you know, he defends there and he's got that sort of talk to the defensive team about, you know, making sure the defence is in order, but I just felt that was maybe just too many sort of changes there and upsetting their rhythm in attack. Look, it's done now. They didn't get the win. They're back at home. And look, if Dearden plays, they're back to where they were, and it'll just be about getting and executing their game plan and building some confidence going into what no doubt will be a final series for them. Yeah,
it'll depend on Dearden and how confident he is, how he has recovered from that very painful blow. So it's a matter of just what percentage he's going to go into the field. I'm sure, having watched most of his performances this year, he goes on with 100% every game, gives his best. If it's good enough, that's fantastic. If it's not, well, he's very determined the next week. Interesting to see, though, how the recovery was. I'm like the rest of you, can't see how probably one of the Agates gets sort of just pushed to the side a little bit. It's a very painful injury, that one, but surely there wouldn't be any gamble taken with that.
See, right now, I reckon for a coach, you're guaranteed finals, right? And they're guaranteed top 4. So it's not the outcome that I'm sort of, you know, yes, I want to win, but it's not the outcome I'm really. It's the process. It's the game that we want to play in the finals. Let's get that on. Let's have a dress rehearsal. Let's make sure we execute that. And if we do, as a coach, I'm happy.
Yeah. Next week it'd be take 2, virtually an identical plan, and to get that in place would be their biggest benefit.
Do you feel that they've hit a bit of a flat spot? Do you think they've got enough gas for the finals, or are they a team that's almost peaked already?
Look, I think it's a similar thing to the Broncos, but you know they've had probably more reps in the Origin team this year than they have in the past. And I've always said, you know, clubs have now worked out how they manage through the Origin period, but all that does is push that down the road to the period between finals and, Origin and finals. So that's the next sort of solution, I think, for clubs, is how you manage your players post-Origin, so that when you get to the back end of the season, that they're fresh and they're firing. And I would say that the Cowboys are feeling some of that effect as well.
A lot of people will suggest that it is the wrong thing to do. Will they be at their best in the finals? Well, if finals don't spark you up, nothing does. And I think that's the way that the Cowboys will probably handle it. They'll be at their best when they go out. The freshening up, well, I guess they're their own judges on in that respect. But I think that they'll be right come week 1 of the finals.
And just finally, before we wrap it up, a quick word on the Titans. Finally back to their winning ways. A good victory, even though they had a player sent off in Brian Kelly. What do you want to see from them in 2023? What do they need to move up the ladder again? They've got a good hooker and they've got an experienced half coming in Kieran Ford.
Yeah. So, and Tanner Boyd's been really impressive at 7. I do like Toby Sexton. I think he's got a great game management, great kicking game. But Tanner's obviously shown some promise there. AJ is going really good at 6, but I do think 1's his best position. So, it'd be like the signs are promising. Yeah, I think the last 2 times I've watched them live is at home, and they towed Manly up, and then they won on the weekend. And they showed a lot of good resolve when they were down to 12. So if I'm the Titans, I want to. It's not just that, I know they can score points. It's just the resolve they show in their defence. And I thought they'd been particularly good in the last couple of weeks. I know the Dragons. They lost a player against the Dragons too. Yeah. So there's encouraging signs there, and if you're out of finals and you're down the bottom of the ladder, all you want to do is build into your off-season.
Yeah, encouraging is a perfect word, Lockie. They've proved to the opposition that they can play. The respect that there was given their way certainly was very impressive. Proved to themselves, but I think self-confidence has been the biggest issue for the Gold Coast. Sometimes after a couple of wins, they've brought out their worst games, and then you could see after that they weren't handling that too well in the weeks that followed. But that was an extremely impressive one. I, like you, was impressed with all of the guys. I thought they probably proved to their teammates that they could play, but more so they proved to themselves how good they are at what they were doing. So if they can repeat that consistently, better times ahead for the Gold Coast.
Well, thanks for your time, boys. Can't wait for the finals to kick off. 4 big games on Channel 9 this week into the lead-up of the NRL final series. Thanks again.